"Daddy, that black waitress looks like Mom." The man turned around and couldn't believe his eyes. The morning sun streamed through the blinds of Michael Carter's bedroom as his alarm clock blared its familiar tune. He groaned, reaching over to silence it before sitting up and rubbing his eyes. The house was quiet, too quiet without Angela's humming from the kitchen or her laughter echoing through the halls. 4 years had passed since the boating accident that took his wife, but some mornings the wound felt as fresh as the day he'd received the devastating news. Today was one of those mornings, and unfortunately, it was also a day he couldn't afford to wallow in grief. Today was Jefferson Elementary's annual lunch with loved ones event, and he had promised Lila he wouldn't miss it. Michael threw on a button-down shirt and slacks, attempting to tame his unruly brown hair before heading to his daughter's room. 6-year-old Lila sat on her bed, already dressed in her favorite purple dress, tiny fingers struggling with the clasp of a heart-shaped locket, a gift from her mother on her 2nd birthday. "Need some help there, pumpkin?" Michael asked, kneeling beside her. Lila nodded, her dark curls bouncing. "I want to wear Mommy's necklace today." Her innocent eyes, so much like Angela's, made Michael's heart ache. "Miss Peterson says special occasions need special jewelry." Michael smiled as he fastened the delicate chain around her neck. "Well, Miss Peterson is right about that. And lunch with your old dad is definitely a special occasion." "You're not old, Daddy." Lila giggled, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "You're only 36. Grandpa says that's just a baby." Michael laughed, scooping her up and carrying her downstairs. "Grandpa also thinks cell phones are witchcraft, so I'm not sure we should trust his judgment." After a quick breakfast of cereal and juice, they piled into Michael's sedan for the drive to Jefferson Elementary. The commute was filled with Lila's animated chatter about her latest art project and the class hamster's escape attempt the previous week. And then Whiskers almost made it to the door, but Ms. Peterson caught him with her lunchbox. Lila explained, eyes wide with excitement. "Sounds like Whiskers is quite the adventurer." Michael replied, grateful for his daughter's resilience. Despite losing her mother at such a young age, Lila maintained a brightness that illuminated their home. They arrived at the school 15 minutes before the scheduled lunch period. The hallways buzzed with activity as parents signed in at the front office, many dressed in business attire, having stepped away from work to share this moment with their children. The walls were adorned with student artwork, colorful family portraits that made Michael's chest tighten. Lila's most recent drawing hung near her classroom door, 3 stick figures, one noticeably smaller than the others, standing beneath a bright yellow sun. The tallest figure had wings and a halo, floating slightly above the other 2. "That's my family," Lila said proudly, pointing to the picture. "That's you, that's me, and that's Mommy watching us from heaven." Michael swallowed hard, squeezing Lila's hand. "It's beautiful, sweetie." They joined the line of parents and children heading toward the cafeteria, the smell of today's special, spaghetti and meatballs, wafting through the air. Lila bounced on her toes, waving to classmates and their parents as they waited. "Daddy, can we sit with Emma and her mom?" Lila asked, pointing to a blonde girl near the front of the line. "Of course we can," Michael agreed, grateful for the distraction. Emma's mother, Sarah, was a kind woman who had helped arrange playdates in the months following Angela's death. She caught his eye and waved, mouthing, "Hello," over the crowd. As they neared the serving station, Michael noticed the cafeteria staff bustling behind the counter, a mix of regular employees and parent volunteers. They wore identical blue aprons and hairnets, efficiently dishing out portions of pasta, salad, and garlic bread. "Look at all that food," Michael said, trying to build enthusiasm. School cafeteria fare wasn't exactly gourmet, but Lila's excitement made it seem like a 5-star restaurant. "I'm getting extra meatballs," Lila declared confidently. "Ms. Rodriguez always gives me extra." The line shuffled forward, and finally it was their turn. Michael helped Lila slide her tray along the metal rails, nodding politely to the servers. An older woman with silver-streaked hair plopped a scoop of spaghetti onto Lila's plate, while another added a small portion of salad that would likely go untouched. Lila was chattering away about wanting chocolate milk when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her small body went rigid, tray trembling in her hands. Michael placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You okay, Pumpkin?" he asked, concerned by her sudden change in demeanor. Lila didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared intently at the woman serving meatballs at the end of the line, a black woman with close-cropped natural hair, her face partially obscured by the hairnet, and the steam rising from the food. When Lila finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daddy," she breathed, tugging urgently at his sleeve. "That black waitress looks like Mom." Michael's first instinct was to gently correct her. Angela had been black, yes, but the resemblance must be superficial, a child's wishful thinking. He'd experienced it himself in the early days of grief, seeing his wife in crowded malls or across busy streets, only to realize his mind was playing cruel tricks. "Honey, I know you miss," he began, but the words died in his throat as the woman looked up, meeting his gaze. Time seemed to stop. The cafeteria noise faded to a distant hum as Michael stared into a face he knew better than his own. The same warm brown eyes with gold flecks near the irises, the same dimple on her right cheek, the same small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. The woman smiled politely, unaware of the earthquake happening in Michael's world. "Meatballs?" she asked Lila, her voice carrying the same melodic quality that had once sung their daughter to sleep. Michael Carter felt the ground shift beneath his feet as he looked at the impossible, a ghost made flesh, serving lunch in his daughter's elementary school cafeteria. Michael couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, those familiar features that had haunted his dreams for 4 years now somehow breathing and alive in his daughter's school cafeteria. He tossed and turned until dawn painted his bedroom walls with pale light, his mind racing with impossible theories. It couldn't be Angela. His wife had been declared finished after the Coast Guard found pieces of their rental boat scattered across the bay. No body had been recovered, but after weeks of searching, the authorities had concluded no one could have survived the storm that night. He'd held a funeral. He'd mourned. He'd rebuilt a life for Lila's sake. And yet, "Daddy, you look tired," Lila observed at breakfast, munching on her toast with critical eyes. "Did you have bad dreams?" Michael managed a smile, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "Just grown-up stuff on my mind, Pumpkin. Nothing for you to worry about." "Was it about the lunch lady who looks like Mom?" Michael nearly spilled his coffee. Children saw everything, missed nothing. "Lila, honey, sometimes people look similar to other people. It's called a doppelganger." "A doppel what?" Lila wrinkled her nose. "A look-alike," Michael explained. "But it's not really Mom, sweetheart. You know that, right?" Lila shrugged, unconvinced. "She has Mom's smile. And she smells like vanilla, just like Mom used to." The vanilla detail hit Michael like a physical blow. Angela had always worn a signature vanilla-scented perfume, a detail he hadn't shared with Lila since the accident. How could his daughter possibly remember that? After dropping Lila at school, Michael drove to his architectural firm but couldn't focus on the blueprints for the new shopping center. By noon, he'd made his excuses to his partner and was headed back to Jefferson Elementary, his heart hammering against his ribs. The school's head administrator, Mrs. Winters, was surprised to see him return so soon after yesterday's event. "Mr. Carter, what brings you back?" she asked, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Michael had rehearsed his excuse. "I wanted to thank the kitchen staff personally. The lunch yesterday was exceptional, and they made the event special for the children." Mrs. Winters beamed. "How thoughtful. Our cafeteria workers rarely get the recognition they deserve. I can take you back if you'd like. Actually," Michael continued carefully, "there was one server in particular. An African-American woman, shorter hair? I believe my daughter mentioned her name was Grace?" "Oh, Grace Holloway." Mrs. Winters nodded. "Wonderful addition to our staff. Started about 8 months ago, and the children adore her. She has quite a way with them. Just like Angela had, Michael thought. His wife had been a pediatric nurse before Lila was born. Does she work full-time? Michael probed, trying to keep his voice casual. Part-time only. She's quite private, that one. Pleasant but keeps to herself. Mrs. Winters lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between us, I think she may have been through something difficult. She never mentions family and declined to be in our staff directory photo. Some people just value their privacy, I suppose. Michael nodded, his suspicion deepening. I'd still like to thank her, if possible. The kitchen staff is on break in 20 minutes. You're welcome to wait in the staff lounge. The 20 minutes stretched like taffy. Michael paced the empty lounge, rehearsing what he would say when he saw her. Would she recognize him? Was this all an elaborate charade? Or was he simply going mad with grief, seeing his late wife in a stranger's face? The door swung open, and several cafeteria workers entered, laughing among themselves. And there she was, Grace Holloway, removing her hairnet to reveal natural curls that were shorter than Angela's had been but unmistakably similar in texture. Up close, without the steam and commotion of the serving line, the resemblance was even more striking. But there were differences too, a certain guardedness in her posture, shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. She noticed him staring and offered a polite smile. Can I help you? Her voice. God, her voice. Michael momentarily lost the ability to speak. I'm Lila Carter's father. From yesterday's lunch event. He extended his hand. Michael Carter. A flicker of something, recognition? Fear, crossed her face before she shook his hand. Grace Holloway. Nice to meet you. Her hand felt exactly as Angela's had, the same slight callus on her trigger finger from years of playing violin, the same delicate bones beneath smooth skin. Michael nearly gasped at the contact. I just wanted to thank you for making the event special. Lila can be picky about food, but she raved about those meatballs. Grace's smile widened, revealing the same slight overbite that had always made Angela self-conscious. Lila's a sweetheart. Those curls of hers remind me of... She trailed off, looking momentarily confused. Someone I used to know, I think. You have a good memory for the children, Michael remarked. They're the best part of this job, she replied. I used to. I think I worked with children before. She laughed nervously. Sorry, that probably sounds strange. Not at all, Michael said gently. What did you do before coming to Jefferson? The question seemed to unsettle her. Odd jobs, mostly. I'm still getting my footing. One of the other cafeteria workers called out to her, and Grace seemed relieved for the interruption. I should get back. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Carter. Michael, he corrected. And likewise, Grace. As he watched her return to work, suspicion crystallized into certainty. The tentative way she spoke of her past, the physical similarities that went beyond coincidence, the inexplicable connection to Lila, it all pointed to an impossible truth. That night, Michael made a call to James Donovan, a private investigator who had helped trace the boat debris after Angela's accident. Within an hour, Donovan was sitting in Michael's living room, listening to his wild theory with surprisingly little skepticism. Amnesia cases aren't uncommon after traumatic events, Donovan said, jotting notes. And without a body. I need to know for sure, Michael insisted. Everything about her, her voice, her mannerisms, even the way she instinctively knew my daughter's name without being told. It's her, James. I'd stake my life on it. Then let's find out, Donovan replied, closing his notebook. But Michael, prepare yourself. Even if this Grace woman is Angela, she clearly doesn't remember you. That reality might be more painful than the one you've been living with. Michael stared at the family portrait on his mantel, himself, Angela, and 3-year-old Lila beaming on a beach that would become the site of tragedy just weeks later. She found her way to our daughter, Michael whispered. That can't be coincidence. Donovan followed his gaze to the photograph. No, he agreed quietly. In my line of work, I've learned there's no such thing. The modest office of Donovan Investigations smelled of old coffee and printer ink. 3 days had passed since Michael's initial visit, and James Donovan looked haggard as he spread documents across his cluttered desk. "I haven't slept much," the investigator admitted, rubbing his stubbled jaw. "Once I started digging into Grace Holloway's background, things got weird fast." Michael leaned forward, heart racing. "Weird how?" "For starters, she doesn't exist, not before 5 years ago." Donovan tapped a thin folder. "No birth certificate, no school records, no tax filings prior to 2020. Her social security number was issued 4.5 years ago through an emergency application process typically used for identity theft victims or people with special circumstances. Like someone suffering from amnesia," Michael whispered. "Exactly." Donovan nodded. "Her employment history is spotty. Waitressing in Charleston for a few months, then a hospice aide in Virginia, brief stint as a receptionist at a dental office in Maryland. Never stays anywhere longer than a year, and all jobs involve caring for people in some capacity." Michael's throat tightened. Angela had always been drawn to caregiving roles, her natural empathy making her exceptional with patients. "What about her current living situation?" Donovan slid a photograph across the desk, a nondescript brick building with a small sign. "New Beginnings Women's Shelter." "She rents a single room there. Has for the past 10 months, ever since she arrived in town. Keeps to herself but helps with community dinners and sometimes reads to the children staying there." He tapped another document. "Her rental application lists no emergency contacts, no references except previous employers. She's alone," Michael said, his voice hollow. "By all appearances. But here's where it gets more interesting." Donovan produced a medical form. "I had to call in a favor from a contact at the county health department. Grace Holloway has visited the free clinic twice since moving here. Both times she declined to provide medical history, claiming she couldn't remember illnesses or surgeries before 5 years ago due to, and I quote, concussion-related memory lapse." Michael's eyes widened. "Angela hit her head when she was thrown from the boat. The Coast Guard found blood on one of the fragments they recovered. There's more," Donovan continued. "The clinic notes mention a distinctive surgical scar on her lower abdomen consistent with a C-section. Lila was born by emergency C-section," Michael confirmed, his voice barely audible. "This can't all be coincidence." Donovan leaned back in his chair, expression grave. "There's one way to find out. I took the liberty of retrieving this from the Jefferson Elementary dumpster." He held up a plastic water bottle. "It has Grace Holloway's lipstick mark on the rim. If you want to compare DNA with something from Angela." "I have her hairbrush," Michael said immediately. "Never could bring myself to throw it away." "That would work." Donovan hesitated. "But Michael, this DNA test will cost several $1,000s to expedite, and I can't guarantee." "Money's not an issue," Michael interrupted. "How soon can we know?" 5 business days, given the rush fee." Donovan gathered the documents. "In the meantime, I suggest you visit the women's shelter. There's a woman there, Evelyn Mercer, who runs the place. She was evasive on the phone, but I sense she knows more about Grace's arrival than she was willing to share." The New Beginnings Women's Shelter was tucked between a laundromat and a discount furniture store in the older part of town. Its faded brick exterior and modest sign belied the warmth within, walls painted in cheerful colors, children's artwork displayed in the common areas, and the smell of something homemade wafting from the kitchen. Evelyn Mercer, a stern-faced woman with silver dreadlocks and penetrating eyes, greeted Michael with measured suspicion. "Mr. Carter, is it? Grace isn't here right now." Her arms crossed defensively. "May I ask what this is regarding?" Michael had prepared his cover story carefully. "I'm considering making a donation to your shelter. Grace spoke highly of your work when we met at my daughter's school, and I wanted to see the facility firsthand." Evelyn's expression softened marginally. "That's generous. Though I wonder why you asked specifically for Grace when you called. She's not on our fundraising committee." "She made quite an impression," Michael said truthfully. "My daughter took to her immediately. She seems to have a special way with children. Something in Evelyn's gaze shifted. Recognition, perhaps. Yes, she does. After a moment's consideration, she gestured toward a small office. Let's talk privately. Once the door closed, Evelyn's professional demeanor gave way to something more protective. Who are you really, Mr. Carter? And what's your interest in Grace? Michael hesitated, then decided truth was his only option. I believe she might be my wife, Angela. She was lost at sea 4 years ago, presumed finished after a boating accident. He expected disbelief or outrage. Instead, Evelyn sank into her chair, looking suddenly tired. I wondered if someone would come eventually. Hope surged through Michael's chest. You know something. I know Grace arrived here nearly 5 years ago in a state of profound confusion. A fishing boat had picked her up, half-drowned and delirious, somewhere off the Carolina coast. Evelyn's voice was measured, careful. She had no identification, no memory of her name or where she came from. Just nightmares about drowning and a fierce determination to avoid hospitals and police. Why would she avoid help? Michael asked, bewildered. Fear, Evelyn said simply. Not rational fear, the kind that comes from trauma. She was convinced someone had deliberately caused the accident, that she wasn't safe. When the fisherman wanted to report finding her, she fled. Eventually, she made her way to our sister shelter in Charleston. Michael's mind raced. The boating accident had been attributed to the sudden storm, equipment failure. There had never been any suggestion of foul play. Did she ever remember anything specific? Names? Places? Evelyn shook her head. Fragments only. She would sometimes wake up calling for someone named Lila. She knew she had medical training. And she had nightmares about a man arguing with her husband just before the storm hit. Man? Michael echoed, confused. What man? She never could recall clearly. Just that there was an argument on the boat, and then the storm came. Evelyn studied Michael's face carefully. If you're truly her husband, Mr. Carter, proceed with caution. Grace has built a life, fragile as it is. Shattering that without warning could cause irreparable harm. I would never hurt her. Michael protested. Intentionally, no. Evelyn's gaze remained unwavering. But trauma and memory are complicated beasts. If Grace is your Angela, there may be reasons beyond injury that her mind chose to forget. As Michael left the shelter, Evelyn's parting words echoed in his mind. Sometimes, Mr. Carter, the mind buries what the heart cannot bear. Walking to his car, Michael felt the weight of new questions pressing upon him. Who was the man Angela had argued with? Why had she never mentioned anyone else joining them on the boat that day? And most troubling of all, if Angela had survived, why hadn't she tried to find her way back to him and Lila? A week passed before Michael could orchestrate another encounter with Grace. Each night, he lay awake, tormented by Evelyn's cryptic warning and the questions that now shadowed Angela's supposed accident. He'd searched his memories repeatedly, trying to recall if Angela had mentioned anyone joining them on that ill-fated boating trip. Nothing surfaced, only the recollection of her unusual insistence on going, despite the threatening weather. Daddy, can we go back to school for lunch again? Lila asked one morning, stirring her cereal without eating it. I miss the lunch lady who looks like Mom. Michael studied his daughter's face. You really think she looks like Mom, don't you? Lila nodded solemnly. And she speaks soft like Mom did when I had bad dreams. The school's monthly lunch calendar, magnet to the refrigerator, showed another. Lunch with loved ones. Event scheduled for the following day, a providential opportunity Michael couldn't ignore. As a matter of fact, we're going tomorrow, he told Lila, whose face brightened instantly. That night, Michael retrieved a small velvet box from his bedside drawer. Inside lay a slender silver bracelet, custom-made for Angela's 30th birthday 3 months before the accident. The inside of the band was engraved with the words, "To Angela, love, M and L." She had worn it constantly, even swimming with it secured tightly to her wrist. If this woman truly was Angela, the absence of the bracelet had always puzzled him, until now. The next day, Michael found himself once again in the bustling elementary school cafeteria, Lila's small hand clutched in his. He'd dressed with unusual care, selecting a blue shirt Angela had always favored. His stomach churned with anxiety as they approached the serving line. And there she was, Grace, serving mashed potatoes with the same elegant wrist motion Angela had used when cooking. She looked up as they approached, her professional smile faltering slightly when she recognized them. "Hi, Miss Grace," Lila chirped, bouncing on her toes. "I made something for you." Before Michael could intervene, Lila thrust forward a folded paper, a drawing she had secretly prepared the night before. Michael caught a glimpse of 3 stick figures, holding hands. Grace accepted the drawing with visible surprise. "For me? That's so sweet, Lila." She unfolded the paper, and Michael watched her face carefully. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, confusion, then a flash of what might have been recognition before she quickly composed herself. "This is beautiful," Grace said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Is this your family?" "Uh-huh," Lila confirmed proudly. "That's Daddy, that's me, and that's my mom. She's in heaven now, but Daddy says she watches over us." Grace's hand trembled almost imperceptibly. "I'm sure she does, sweetheart." "You can keep it," Lila insisted. "I have lots of pictures of my mom at home. Daddy keeps them in frames everywhere." Something in Grace's expression shifted, a softening, a moment of vulnerability quickly masked. "Thank you, Lila. I'll keep it safe." They moved down the line, collecting their food, but Michael strategically doubled back, claiming he'd forgotten napkins. As he approached Grace again, he intentionally fumbled his tray, sending utensils clattering to the counter. "I'm so sorry," he apologized as Grace instinctively reached to help. "Clumsy of me." "No problem at all," she assured him, gathering the fallen napkins. As she leaned forward, the sleeve of her uniform rode up slightly, and Michael's breath caught in his throat. There, partially concealed beneath the blue fabric, was a thin silver band. "That's a beautiful bracelet," he remarked, heart hammering. Grace's reaction was instantaneous. She jerked her arm back, quickly tugging the sleeve down to cover the jewelry. "Oh, thank you," she mumbled, suddenly avoiding eye contact. "May I ask where you got it?" Michael pressed gently. "My late wife had one very similar." A flicker of panic crossed Grace's features. I'm not sure, actually. I think a nurse gave it to me when I was in the hospital. Said it was found with me when I was brought in." The practiced explanation sounded hollow, rehearsed. Michael took a calculated risk. "Is it engraved?" he asked quietly, so only she could hear. Grace froze, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly. For several seconds she simply stared at him, something desperate and confused swimming in her gaze. "I don't think so," she finally whispered, but her hand moved instinctively to touch the bracelet through her sleeve, a gesture so achingly familiar that Michael had to steady himself against the counter. "Grace," he said gently, "I think we need to talk. Away from here." Her professional mask slipped completely then, revealing naked fear beneath. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Carter. Please excuse me, I have children to serve." She turned away sharply, moving further down the line. Michael returned to Lila, his mind racing. The bracelet was undeniable evidence, custom-made, one of a kind. But Grace's reaction suggested more than simple confusion. There was active avoidance, perhaps even fear. When lunch ended, Michael lingered, watching Grace from across the cafeteria. She moved with the same graceful efficiency he remembered, but there was tension in her shoulders now, a wariness in her posture. Several times, he caught her glancing in their direction, only to quickly look away when their eyes met. As parents and children filtered out, Michael whispered to Lila, "Sweetheart, would you like to thank Ms. Grace one more time before we go?" Lila nodded enthusiastically, and they approached Grace as she wiped down the counters. She tensed visibly when she saw them coming. "Ms. Grace, thank you for the extra pudding," Lila said sweetly, wrapping her small arms around Grace's waist in an impulsive hug. Michael saw it happen, the moment of surrender as Grace's defenses crumbled. She bent down to return Lila's embrace, tears glistening in her eyes. In that unguarded moment, as she held Michael's daughter in her arms, the bracelet slipped into view again. "Angela," Michael said softly, not a question but a statement of absolute certainty. Grace, Angela, looked up at him, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. I don't know who I am," she whispered brokenly. "But I dream of you. Both of you. Every night." Lila, confused but sensing the gravity of the moment, stayed nestled against Grace, one small hand patting her back comfortingly, exactly as Angela had taught her to do when someone was crying. "I have a way to find out for sure," Michael said, kneeling beside them. "A DNA test. It can tell us the truth, once and for all." Grace's body tensed, her breathing suddenly rapid and shallow. "What if I don't want to know?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What if remembering is dangerous?" "Dangerous?" Michael echoed, Evelyn's warnings suddenly resonating. "Angela, what are you afraid of?" "I don't know," she admitted, anguish etching her features. "That's what terrifies me." The white envelope sat unopened on Michael's kitchen table for nearly 24 hours after its delivery. James Donovan had brought it personally, squeezing Michael's shoulder before leaving him alone with the document that would either resurrect his wife or confirm that grief had driven him to delusion. "Just remember, whatever it says, Lila needs you whole," Donovan had advised. Michael had arranged for Lila to spend the night at her grandmother's, unable to bear the thought of seeing disappointment cloud her features if the test proved negative. Now, in the stillness of early morning, he finally reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. The clinical language of the report swam before his eyes, technical terms about mitochondrial DNA and statistical probabilities, but one sentence stood out in stark clarity. "The compared samples indicate a 99.998% probability of being from the same individual." Michael sank back in his chair, the paper fluttering from his grasp. It was her. Grace Holloway was Angela Carter. His wife was alive. He was still sitting there, stunned, when his phone rang an hour later. "Michael?" Grace's voice was hesitant, strained. "Can you come to the shelter? Something's happening to me." He found her in the shelter's small garden, sitting rigidly on a stone bench, her face ashen. Evelyn hovered nearby, concern etched in her features. "She woke up screaming," Evelyn explained quietly. "Said she dreamed about a storm, but this time she remembered more than just water and darkness." Grace looked up at Michael, her eyes haunted. "I remember a man arguing with you on the boat. The same nightmare I've had for years, but clearer now. His face. I almost recognized him." Michael frowned, perplexed. "Angela, there was no one else on the boat with us that day." "There was," she insisted, pressing her palms against her temples. "After you went below deck to check on the motor, someone came aboard. Someone I knew." Michael knelt before her, gently taking her hands. "The DNA test came back this morning," he said softly. "It's positive, Angela. You're my wife." She didn't react with shock or joy, only a quiet resignation, as if she'd known all along on some level. "I have flashes, fragments. When Lila hugged me, it was like a dam breaking. I remember her birth, 36 hours of labor, then the emergency C-section. I remember you cutting the cord, crying." Tears streamed down Michael's face. "Yes. You were so brave. The bracelet," she continued, touching her wrist where the silver band remained. "I never took it off, not even for the boat trip. When I washed up on shore, it was still there, my only link to something. Someone." Her eyes found his, desperate for answers. "Why didn't I come find you? If I loved you, why would I stay away?" "You didn't remember," Michael assured her. "It wasn't your fault." She shook her head vehemently. "It wasn't just memory loss. I was hiding. When those fishermen found me, I begged them not to report it. I was terrified of being found." Michael's blood ran cold. "Found by whom?" "I don't know," she whispered. But I'm starting to remember the argument on the boat. A man, dark hair, expensive watch. He was angry about money. Michael's mind raced, cataloging every male acquaintance from that period of their lives. We should take this to the police. No! Angela's reaction was immediate, visceral. No police. Not yet. I need to remember more first. They agreed to meet later at Michael's house. Angela still couldn't bring herself to call it home, after she'd had time to process the confirmation of her identity. As Michael turned to leave, Angela grabbed his arm. Robert, she said suddenly, her eyes wide. The man's name was Robert. Does that mean anything to you? A chill ran through Michael. Robert Kendrick? My former business partner? Angela's breath hitched. I don't know. But the name feels right. She pressed her eyes shut, concentrating. Something about insurance. He kept saying it would look like an accident. The world seemed to tilt beneath Michael's feet. Robert Kendrick had been his architectural partner when the economy crashed in 2020. Their firm had been struggling, and Robert had pushed for more and more questionable decisions to keep them afloat. After Angela's death, Robert had been the one to discover that she had a substantial life insurance policy through her former hospital employer, one that had helped Michael stay financially stable during his grief. Robert had also been the one to suggest the boating trip, lending Michael his vessel for the day. He tried to finish you. Michael breathed, the horrifying reality crystallizing. And then cashed in on the insurance when you were presumed finished. I think I confronted him, Angela said slowly, her face contorted with the effort of retrieval. I found something in his office, papers showing he was embezzling from the firm. I brought them on the boat, planning to show you after our outing. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Robert came aboard while I was checking the engine. You confronted him with what you'd found. Then the storm hit. No, Angela corrected, another memory surfacing. He tampered with the boat. I saw him do something to the fuel line before he jumped back to the dock. I was running to warn you when the engine exploded. Her eyes filled with tears. I was thrown overboard. The last thing I remember was seeing you unconscious on the deck as the boat started to sink. Michael remembered nothing after the explosion, only waking up in the hospital days later, having been rescued by a passing yacht that spotted the wreckage. By then, Angela had been missing for days, presumed drowned. Robert visited me in the hospital, Michael recalled, rage building. Acted like the grieving friend. He even spoke at your memorial service. Where is he now? Angela asked, voice trembling. Living in luxury in Florida, Michael said bitterly. The insurance money saved our firm, and he bought out my half when I could barely function after losing you. Built the company into something massive. Angela's face hardened with resolve. We need evidence. The papers I found, they might still be somewhere. And we need to protect Lila. Michael added urgently. If Robert discovers you're alive. Angela's eyes flashed with a mother's fierce protectiveness. He'll never get near her. I may not remember everything, but I remember how to fight for my family. For the first time since finding her, Michael saw his Angela fully present, determination replacing fear, strength overcoming confusion. Let's go home, he said softly, offering his hand. Lila's waiting. The Carter family home stood bathed in golden afternoon light as Michael's car pulled into the driveway. Angela sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes drinking in every detail of the colonial-style house she had chosen but couldn't remember selecting. We painted it blue last summer, Michael explained gently. It used to be yellow. Angela nodded, a faint memory stirring. I always thought yellow was too bright. They had agreed to introduce Angela to Lila carefully. The official story, for everyone outside their immediate circle, would be that Grace Holloway was a friend helping the family. The truth would come later, after they had secured evidence against Robert Kendrick and ensured their safety. Michael's mother, Eleanor, waited inside with Lila. She had been the only person Michael had trusted with the full truth, and even she had greeted the news with understandable skepticism, until she'd seen the DNA results. "Ready?" Michael asked, watching Angela steel herself with a deep breath. "No," she admitted with a nervous laugh. "But I don't think I ever will be." They walked to the front door together. Michael entered first, calling out, "We're home!" Lila came bounding into the foyer, stopping short when she saw Angela standing uncertainly behind her father. "Miss Grace? You came to our house!" Eleanor appeared in the living room doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, eyes brimming with tears as she beheld her daughter-in-law, a ghost made flesh. "Hello, Lila," Angela said softly, kneeling to the child's level. "Your dad invited me for dinner. I hope that's okay." Lila nodded enthusiastically. "Did you bring your bracelet? The one that matches my mom's?" Angela's eyes flicked to Michael's, a silent question passing between them. He nodded almost imperceptibly. She slowly extended her wrist, showing the silver band. "I did. Would you like to see it?" Lila stepped closer, examining the bracelet with solemn concentration. Her small fingers traced the engraving. "To Angela, love, M and L." "That's my initial!" Lila exclaimed. "L for Lila. And M for Daddy." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "But why does it say Angela instead of Grace?" The adults held their breath. This moment had come sooner than they'd anticipated. Angela glanced at Michael, who moved to kneel beside them, forming a small circle on the foyer floor. "Lila," he began carefully, "do you remember when you told me that Ms. Grace looked like Mom?" Lila nodded. "Well, sometimes life gives us miracles," Michael continued, his voice thick with emotion. "And sometimes people we thought were gone forever find their way back to us." Lila's eyes widened, darting between her father and Angela. "Like in my picture? The one I drew?" "Yes, sweetheart," Angela whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Like in your picture. Are you my mom?" Lila asked, her voice tiny and fragile with hope. Angela couldn't speak, could only nod, opening her arms in silent invitation. Lila hesitated for only a heartbeat before launching herself into the embrace. "I knew it," she sobbed. "I knew it was you." Eleanor watched from the doorway, weeping silently as her granddaughter was reunited with the mother she'd barely had a chance to know. Michael enveloped both his wife and daughter in his arms, completing the circle broken 4 years earlier. Later that evening, after Lila had fallen asleep, insisting that Angela read her bedtime story, the adults gathered in the kitchen to address the dangerous reality underlying their miracle. "James has been digging into Robert's financials," Michael explained. "There's evidence of embezzlement dating back years, but nothing concrete enough for prosecution." "What about the documents I found?" Angela asked. "The ones I was bringing to show you on the boat?" Michael shook his head. "If they existed, they went down with the boat." "Not necessarily," Angela said slowly, a memory surfacing. "I remember now, I scanned them. Emailed copies to myself as insurance. Your email accounts were closed after you were declared finished," Michael pointed out. "Not my secret account," Angela countered. "The one I use for my journal. LilisMom83@summit-mail.com. Michael stared at her in astonishment. "You never told me about that account." "It was where I wrote things I didn't want to worry you with," Angela admitted. "Work stress, my concerns about Robert." Within minutes, they were huddled around Michael's laptop. Angela's fingers hovered hesitantly over the keyboard before typing in the password. "Violin Sunset 2019, a reference to their first date. The account opened, revealing hundreds of unread emails accumulated over 4 years. And there, dated 3 days before the boating accident, was a message Angela had sent to herself with the subject line: "Backup, RK evidence." Attached were PDFs of financial statements, falsified client invoices, and a damning paper trail of money diverted from the firm to offshore accounts. "This is enough for the FBI," Eleanor whispered. The following weeks unfolded in a carefully orchestrated sequence. First, Angela's identity was legally restored through a complex process involving DNA evidence and testimony from medical experts about traumatic amnesia. Then, With James Donovan's help, they presented their evidence to federal authorities. Robert Kendrick was arrested during a charity gala in Miami, the public humiliation a small but satisfying addition to the multiple felony charges he now faced. His empire, built on fraud, crumbled overnight. For the Carters, the road ahead remained challenging. Angela's memories returned in inconsistent waves, some days bringing perfect clarity, others mired in frustrating blankness. She worked with a trauma specialist, slowly reconnecting the fractured pieces of her identity. They held a private ceremony on the beach, not to renew vows, Angela insisted, but to honor the journey that had brought them back together. Lila scattered wildflowers on the waves, watching them drift out to sea, a symbolic release of the pain that had separated their family. 3 months later, Angela was ready to step back into her role as a mother in public. The school administration, now aware of the extraordinary circumstances, helped facilitate her transition from cafeteria worker to volunteer classroom aide, allowing her to be near Lila while still giving her purpose. On the first day of the new school term, Angela accompanied Michael to drop Lila off at class. Ms. Peterson's first-grade students were tasked with drawing family portraits to decorate the classroom walls. Lila worked with intense concentration, her small tongue protruding slightly as she carefully colored 3 figures standing hand in hand beneath a bright blue sky. Above them, she wrote in wobbling letters, "My family, Daddy, me, and Mommy, who I found at school." When Angela saw the drawing later that week, she traced the colorful figures with trembling fingers. "It's still hard to believe sometimes," she confessed to Michael as they walked home, Lila skipping ahead of them, "that I found my way back. You once told me true love leaves clues," Michael reminded her, taking her hand where the silver bracelet still encircled her wrist. "We just had to follow them home." Ahead of them, Lila turned and called impatiently, "Come on, Mommy and Daddy! Race you to the corner!" Angela laughed, a sound Michael had feared he would never hear again, and broke into a run, her hands still firmly clasped in his as they chased their daughter toward a future reclaimed from the shadows of the past.